The couple episodes previous, I showed a pretty disheveled workspace, and I have now got it 99.9% of the way to where I want it. So let's do a little bit of a tour of the workshop. Do a workshop tour here, starting at the bottom from the right side here. We have our handy dandy CNC machine. You guys are already familiar with that. Down below it got some power tools, new bandsaw, a sander, a little micro table saw that I'm not quite satisfied with, but we'll cross that bridge later. My two most used machines, my little disc sander and the drill press. Got a little vise in the back there. In the front corner got another vise, some scrap wood, some rags. And if we go down to the bottom here, I have the two swivel vices that I like, a little mini paint booth in the back, and then on the other side, the liquids and chemicals and stuff that I don't want up in the top. So I put them at the bottom. And then in the corners, we have the leftover remnants of my scrap wood collection. I was actually able to use quite a bit of it on this project. Moving up to the desktop here, we have drawers. This is one of my most commonly used drawers. It's got all my drill bits and pretty much just drill bits, machining squares, some punches. Inside this box I actually have a little tap and die set. This box used to hold my little caliper, and I needed a place to put my tap and die set, so I milled out with my CNC machine a little tray that goes in there to help organize all of it. Then pretty much basically with this shop, everything that I need is within hand's reach. So anything that is like I don't use very frequently goes into the back, like that little box of micro bolts. Basically I don't use those very frequently anymore. I think I got those when I was intending on using those for pins in my projects, but I've since learned how to make those out of brass, so I don't really use them frequently anymore. And then just extra drill bits over there, and then a mixed pack of all those drill bits. I had a lot of stuff in these drawers. They basically became like a collection spot over a period of time. This drawer was particularly bad. I just kept throwing stuff in here. I had these little trays of stuff like scraps and leftovers, and even ones that were supposed to be designated for just one thing and then ended up getting filled with a bunch of other junk. So a lot of my other commonly used stuff, like my bending brake and my little miniature vices. Have a bigger bending brake over there. This guy looks kind of out of place, but he's actually quite useful. This is a chisel. I think it was my grandfather's on my dad's side of the family. He was a carpenter. As you can see, somebody who was definitely not my grandfather decided to use this on something that it probably shouldn't have been used on. So eventually I will take this to the belt sander and redo the edge of that. But this thing is probably from the 1940s or 50s. It's pretty old. And then a panel removal tool, which is actually quite useful for taking apart models. And then some old files in the back there, some more small tools, and then a whole bunch of Allen keys. On the sidewall here we have our eyes and ears safety equipment. We have everything from, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get hit in the face with material, to definitely going to get hit with material. Got the big old earmuffs. I used to do earplugs, but I found that they got really dirty and I just didn't like sticking a bunch of plugs, dirty plugs in my ears, so those went adios. And then up here you can see I made a lot of use of those homemade plexiglass hangers that I did in the CNC machine. And then I have all my masking tapes up there, including the double-sided masking tape that I use for CNC work to hold stuff down, and it is made by Sure Tape. And then just various other tapes. And let's see here on the back corner. Oh, that guy? We'll talk about him in a minute. That might be the next project. I'm not going to treat you guys like kids. That's definitely the next project. Let's see, we've got all my files and stabby things for creating lines and stuff. that is a spoon. It went down the garbage disposal. It's sitting here waiting to get smoothed back out so it can go back in the drawer because we just got the set. And it's, well, it's like one of two of these spoons, so I want to make sure we have those back in there. And I got all the rest of my stock over there, including metal and plastic stock. A little roll of Tamiya masking tape. This stuff's pretty nifty. And we got the back panel, pretty much the usual suspects. I just reorganized them, added a thing over in the bottom corner for my vices, clamps. And then I actually need to make a holder for these. These are all my bits for the router on the CNC machine. Then come over here to the wall of wires. There is a lot going on here, and I'll explain all of it. It's not nearly as messy as it looks. So starting at the bottom, this is just a little, basically it's a power strip that's shaped like a wall plug. It's a 15 amp fuse, and I've bound up all the wires independently. These are pretty organized. I can just pop them out if I needed to. And then the pedal for my Gorbit, which is my handpiece, runs up into it. But the safety thing that we've installed is this big old Bertha right here. So this is what controls the power to the router and to the Shape Oko CNC gantry. In order to be able to use both of those, I have to click this guy on, and then you can see there's this wire running out of it, which goes to this. I'll talk about that in a second. And it is plugged into the CNC machine, which is actually that cord than the router. So that runs up, and then this cuts the power to it. Unless you press that start button, that engages it. So if there's an emergency, this thing is doing something that I don't want it to do, I could come over here and just smack this. By doing so, it depresses the little stop button in there, and then there's a lock up here just in case it wants to like pop back out. That makes it so you have to disengage this and then hit the start button to make things go again. It's very unattractive, but I don't want to have to try to like reach around and hope I'm getting the right switch. I want to be able to just go, oh no, that's not doing what I want it to do, and be able to just smack this guy and shut it off. So these wires, I wanted to keep them as close to the wall as possible, and then I have this little box. I was going to screw it in place, but it just kind of holds itself in there. This was for another project I did a while back. I tried doing making a homemade resistant soldering iron, and it failed miserably because I'm not an electrician, and this is just a leftover control box for that, and it runs this nice, it's actually a 13 amp wire. But none of this stuff can handle anything over 15 amp. Like that thing won't take anything more than 15 amp. And nothing that I have running on here is higher than 15 amp. And then we have the controller for the vacuum. I explained this one in a previous video. And then just all the various wires that are running out. A lot of wires, but they're all pretty organized. The Gorbit handpiece, I need to make a hanger for this one. Oh, there it is right here. It broke, so I'm going to CNC a piece to screw into this. And we have the top shelf, got the tall awkward stuff, my not accurate miter box in the corner there, and various trays like extra hooks for the backboard, thumbtacks, scrap brass, lots and lots of glue. I have a box here that has a bunch of stuff organized into it. All the stuff that I was talking about sorting out earlier is in there, as well as some airbrushing supplies, all my blades, putties, soldering, and then parts for a future project. Pens and paintbrushes. I'm gonna CNC some organizers to drop on the top of these tea canisters here. That will organize all of that. Then we got all the soldering supplies over there, nice and spaced out. I wanted everything to be so, like, I only had to move one thing in order to get to something else. I didn't want stuff really stacked in there. And then just rechargers for the torch, as well as some wood glue and rubbing alcohol. And then we get to the very, 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 very top shelf. And I've just got random, those are like vacuum inserts for the back of some of my tools. That is a ABC punch set that I use like once a project. Box of sandpaper, Caterpillar performance guides, random tools that I don't use very frequently, Kita box, sandpaper, and some suction stuff, and then our handy little gorbet on my piece of pipe hanging off the top. And I think that is it. Oh no, there's one more thing. I'm going to, at some point in time, I'm going to create a plug with a port on the side of this so that I can run the vacuum hose, which is actually tucked up right there, through there, and then attach it to whatever tool I'm working with. So let's get to what you guys really care about, the next project. Alright, so the next project. I think all of you know this model. This is the Caterpillar 988B that is made by Ertl. I do believe it is a recast of the early NZG 988B model, and I'm going to be taking this model and turning it into a 988F. Now I do really like the 988B. The 988B is the one that started this new generation of larger loaders for Caterpillar, and it has had a long-lasting career that has gone from the 70s all the way to the late 80s, early 90s, and was replaced with the F, I believe, in 1993. I'll have better info for you guys later when we get into the project, but there's some structural changes that need to happen to turn this into an F. Now I know you're thinking, Stephen, NZG did a 988F. Well, they did, but they didn't. All they did was a decal change. To turn this into a 988F, we need to put a bigger radiator on it first. The 988F had a wider radiator, and it also had a different rollover protection on it. Now the 988B was a great loader, however the early versions did have some cooling issues. This is actually a second generation 988B, and you can tell because it has the grill vents on top of the engine cover. The early one actually had the vents in the side, and the top was solid, but I believe they found it was not sufficient for providing good cooling, because what does heat do? Heat likes to go up, so basically you're recycling the hot air inside the engine bay and then expecting it to force out the sides. But if you vent the top of it, you get the natural updraft, forces the heat out the top, especially when the machine is in motion. The air going under the machine will come up under and force the heat out of the hood, or out of the top I should say. And then they're also able to draw air in through the back. So we'll need to make a wider radiator, new engine cover for this, and then need to take this cab off, grind off this rollover protection, which shouldn't be too bad actually, and then recreate a new one of those out of brass. And then, let's see, what else? We're going to change the wheels and tires, because the wheels and tires on this are correct as far as the diameter, however incorrect as far as the size of the tire in comparison to the size of the wheels. So the wheel should actually be a lot smaller than this, and then the tire should be thicker. We'll get to why Ertl did that in a second. And then it needs another bucket as well. This is a sand bucket, and I just don't like the way it looks, and I don't feel like trying to cut it out. So I actually have a donor machine coming that I'm going to use for parts. Now, this model was designed by Ertl to kind of try to fit two needs. They wanted something that kids could play with, or people like me who can roll it across the desk. They wanted a smooth edge that would be able to dig into dirt in the backyard without worry of breaking off teeth. And they wanted tires that would roll really well and not warp over time. So if you make a lower profile tire like this out of a little bit harder rubber, you get a little bit of a better roll. And also they were able to use this tire on quite a few different models. I think they used this tire on scraper models as well. I don't think the ATDs had these ones. They had a little bit of a different one. Also, my donor model will probably have some of the hydraulic features inside here, and then articulating wheel axles front and rear. So if I can swap that stuff over, I will. I would show you the donor model, but I don't have it. Basically, I want to make this thing look good enough to sit next to my CCM 992, and it currently does not. Now you'll notice this model does look a bit different than the 988B that you probably have sitting in your collection. I tested out some paint pens early on in my model building career on these windowsills just to try to make them look good. I will end up cutting these out obviously and then setting them inside the sill. Same thing in the front to try to make that look better. The geometry on this cab is relatively accurate. It's a little bit off, but I think casting something like this is probably pretty difficult to do. On the mass, let's see, there will probably be some other changes we'll go over, and then obviously a whole bunch of adding rails, metal parts in lieu of plastic parts, better looking lights, so on and so forth. So that is the next project that we have here on the channel. Anyways, I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for sitting through the shop update. And the next episode, we'll get to tearing this guy apart and tearing down the donor model and going into further detail on what's going to get done to the model. Actually, maybe I won't do it that way. Maybe we'll start tearing it down and then I'll go into details throughout the build. See you guys next time. Adios.